Hello, Global Gardeners. Happy Monday. Happy start to your gardening week. It's been a good start to my gardening week. The weather's still holding up. It did get cold last night. We're starting to drop below 50 Fahrenheit, 10 Celsius. And there's just still so much to do in the garden. And I love getting out and doing it. Got up, of course, early today to go open up the greenhouse because I've been closing it at night to help hold in some of the residual heat. And I realized that I never closed it up last night. So it was open. Everything's still good, not a problem. But it's just one of those things. There's just so many things to do in gardening. Often we forget some of the most obvious. And so I'll be going back out as soon as we finish the show today and getting some more work done. I hope you'll have that opportunity too. One of the things that's coming up for many of us is garlic. And that's going to be the focus of the show today. So, of course, we'll answer your questions, but I wanted to do that focus on garlic because you need to plan ahead if you want to grow garlic in your garden. And one of the first things you need to plan for is actually getting your garlic bulbs. Now, when you plant garlic, you get the bulb, you separate the bulb out into cloves, and then you plant the cloves. One of the biggest issues that gardeners have, and I've run into this problem myself, is you want to plant garlic and you wait until you're ready to plant, and then you can't find any garlic because it is all sold out. So we're still probably a month away, maybe two for some of you before we're putting the garlic in the ground. But now really is a good time to start thinking about getting your garlic bulbs if you're planning on doing garlic. There's two primary kinds of garlic that we grow. There's the soft neck varieties and the hard neck varieties. The soft neck varieties are what you see in the store. Almost all garlic you buy in the store is going to be a soft neck variety, and almost all of it here in the States, and I think even in Canada, comes from California. California is a major producer of garlic for the supermarkets. When you grow the soft neck garlic, one of the biggest advantages is that it stores very well and it can store for a very long time. That's a big reason why that's what you get in the supermarket, because they grow it in California and then they have to save it for months before they send it to the store, and it comes over many months periodically throughout the year. And it's the soft neck varieties that allow you to do that. Hard neck varieties don't have that long storage capability. They'll store well, but it's a handful of months rather than potentially up to a year with some of the soft neck varieties. One of the biggest factors when choosing your garlic is the taste. We think of garlic as having a garlicky taste, but when you start growing some of these other varieties, particularly the hard neck varieties, oh, the flavors are amazing. They're intense. They are so layered that it goes well beyond that basic soft neck variety you get at the supermarket. I have a video, and no doubt Jay will put this up any minute now, on garlic and which one was the best tasting when I grew a number of different varieties. I got some family members together and we did a garlic tasting. And you can see in that video the results of us tasting these different types of garlic. I like the hard neck varieties because of that intense flavor they have. It's still a garlicky flavor. It's just different than what you get in the supermarket, which is pretty standard when we're doing our own gardening. Music is a variety that is probably my favorite. I have a lot of it right now because I grew it last year. I saved the bulbs and I'll be planting here next month. So music is at the top of my list. But as we proceed through the show, let me know what questions you have about garlic, what varieties you're growing, and we'll talk much more about that. Shandy's Garden is asking, since it's been extremely dry, can I put my garlic out and not water them in and let them store there until rain naturally happens? My garlic bulbs are still sitting in the garage. You could do that. I might caution against it. the thing about storing garlic, so when I talk about garlic being able to be stored for months, that's when it's in a cool, dry location. As soon as you put it outside, and especially if you put it in the soil, if you're not watering it, now it's going to get hot and it might actually desiccate. You might actually draw some of the moisture of the clove out into the soil if you're not going to water it. And then by the time the rains come or you water, the clove may not have enough energy. It may have lost too much moisture. So I think it's a better idea to store in a cool, dry location out of direct sunlight before you put it in the ground. Then when you put it in the ground, it's fresh. It's got all of its energy. The rains can come. You can water it if the rains don't come. And I think that's a much better way to get a good start with your garlic. Christine is saying, you might mention this today, but I'm looking for a good place to buy garlic online. I picked a new spot to grow in for this year. I'm looking for the hardneck type. So there's a ton. And I've ordered from at least a dozen different online sites, and I've never been disappointed. Now, I might suggest first going to a local nursery. Nurseries are going to have the varieties that do best in your area. So when I go to my favorite nursery locally, they typically will have 6, 8, maybe 10 different varieties of garlic, both soft neck and hard neck. And I am pretty confident that all of those varieties will do well in my garden. And so that's a good place to start. But if you do want to do online ordering, because it does tend to be maybe a little cheaper to go online, and the choices are going to be just through the roof when you go online, I wouldn't worry too much. Just use a seed company that you like, and chances are they're going to be selling garlic. And if you are happy with the seeds you've received, then you'll probably be happy with the garlic bulbs that you'll receive. And so, one thing when you buy garlic online, do be aware that where we live makes a difference on which garlics do best. That's why I suggest going to a local nursery. The hardneck varieties tend to do better for those of us that have harsh winters. The hardneck varieties that you'll find are often Russian varieties. I like growing the Russian purple striped garlic, and there's a number of different varieties of striped garlic. Those types of garlic will do well when it gets really cold and stays really cold for a long time. The soft neck varieties, not all of them can hold up to a harsh winter. California is growing the soft neck varieties because that's what does well when the winters are not as harsh. For more moderate and mild winters, the soft neck varieties tend to do better. Now, you can grow both in most gardens and it'll probably be okay. But if you're looking for the best match, that's kind of the way to look at it. And if you live in a very hot region, above zone 7, definitely in zone 8 and 9, you have to be very selective about the type of garlic you grow. There are Asian varieties and Cajun varieties of garlic that are specifically situated, or I won't say designed, but best for growing in those really hot regions. Because one of the things that garlic needs is cold. Be it a soft neck or a hard neck, it's that cold that actually stimulates the clove to turn into a bulb. Without the cold temperatures, you're not going to get the bulb development of garlic. You can plant cloves in early spring to harvest later in the year, and they're not going to develop that big bulb. It's going to be a lot like growing green onions. You have a garlic plant, and the clove will grow and expand, and you'll get some really nice leaves, but you're not going to get a big bulb unless the plant is exposed to that cold. That's why in those really warm regions that have warm winters, you need to look for varieties that will be best without that exposure to cold. So I think experimentation can be important as you try to find what you have. Lauren says, I ordered music garlic today and will be getting some others from my local nursery. There you go. And that's actually, like I mentioned, that's the approach I take, is when I want to try something new and unique, I get it online. When I want to support my local nursery with the varieties that I know will do well and that I've grown before, then I get them from a local nursery. And so there's Mike. Always nice to have you here, Mike. I appreciate your support with all of my videos and the live streams. Rick is saying, MI Gardeners reselling garlic bulbs, planned for 3 p.m. tomorrow for a restock website. Okay, good to know that. MI Gardeners, to my point, MI Gardeners got some great seeds and started with just the seeds, and now has got the garlic as well. So where you buy your seeds is a good place to look to initially get the bulbs for the planting that you're going to see. Thank you for that, Jay, and always good to see Jay and Heidi here, our wonderful moderators. Yeah, this live stream is live. You can watch it on replay. And so if you don't see me, or if you're having some issues with the live stream, you can reload it and start from the beginning, and you'll only be about 10 minutes behind if you want to watch the whole thing. Or you can catch up to us live and then always skip back. It's just like a regular video. You can stay where we are in the present and always go backwards. And if you're watching in replay, well, you can go to fast forward, you can go to the back, you can jump all over the place. So for now, it is live. And Jen says, went to the Garlic Festival in Gilroy, California several years ago. I think they stopped it over the pandemic and maybe haven't started back up. Anyway, you could smell the fields from miles away. Yeah, I lived in California for a while. Gilroy was amazing when they had their garlic festival. Took my kids there when they were little and had garlic ice cream. And one of them liked the ice cream. One of them didn't like the ice cream. My wife did not like the ice cream at all. I liked the garlic ice cream. But at Gilroy, you could get everything garlic. It was garlic candy, garlic ice cream, garlic sauces of all types, and then, of course, all the fresh garlic you could possibly want. And you could smell it for miles because there were miles and miles of fields of garlic, because they had to support all the businesses that use garlic and all the supermarkets that sell garlic. And Gilroy, California was kind of the center of that. And yes, that's what I've heard as well, is that the festival was discontinued a few years ago and that it hasn't started back up again. So I don't know, because that was such a wonderful tradition, if maybe they will resurrect it at some point. I hope they do. But it really is just an amazing event. If you ever happen to be in Gilroy at garlic time, it's a lot of fun. Lauren says, I love hardneck because you get the scapes and then the bulbs. Yeah, so let's talk about scapes. So I have a video on making pesto from garlic scapes. That's kind of my preferred method to use the scapes. So the scape, if you're not familiar with it, is part of the hard neck. And so when we talk about the hard neck versus soft neck, the hard neck varieties actually have a center stalk that grows up through the bulb. And it's that stalk, which is called a scape, that grows and becomes just another part of the plant. It's a flower stalk. So as that stalk grows, initially it has a little curlicue at the tip. It's all curled up. And then the curl will straighten out, and then the seed pods will develop at the top of that scape. It's completely edible. You can cut the scape and use it like you would chives or green onions when it's young, because it tends to be more tender. When it gets a little more mature and it's erect, it's lost that curl, it becomes woodier and isn't as good to eat, but you can still get the flavor in stews and soups and anything else you would use the garlic in. It's a much milder flavor of garlic in the scape. When you cut the scape, or at the time of harvest, the scape will almost, in many cases, naturally fall. That's what leaves behind that hard center core of the bulb. And that's why it's called a hard neck variety, because that center gets hard. Soft neck varieties don't have that. So there is no flower stalk that goes up. And that's a great way. If you see a bulb and you don't know if it's a hard neck or a soft neck, is just look for that center core, and that'll give you your answer. Now, we grow garlic. Generally, we propagate it by taking the bulbs, planting the cloves, and then we get the exact same variety of garlic. It's essentially the same as what we do with strawberries, where we take a runner and we plant the runner. You are getting genetically the same plant, because all we're doing is taking the roots and just spreading them around. When you want to try something new, if you want to actually experiment by creating a new variety of garlic, and this is what the professional growers have done as they develop new varieties, you need to get the flowers to produce the seeds and then plant the seed of the garlic. When we save those seeds of a hardneck variety, you can plant them. It typically takes a number of years, 2 to 3 years, before it gets to the point that you're going to be able to harvest a bulb of that garlic. And you need to be aware that what you're growing may end up being a hybrid, because if you're growing a variety of garlic that was developed by professional growers and sold to you, if you plant the cloves, you're getting that variety. But if you save the seeds, if it's a hybrid type of garlic, now those seeds are from a hybrid garlic plant, and you never know for sure what you're going to get. And so that's how they crossbreed garlic and develop new varieties, is by intentionally developing the crosses and then planting the seeds and then waiting for years to see what happens. So by all means, it is something that you can try. But yeah, grow the hard necks and see what you can do with the scapes. If you want to try some interesting recipes, it's in place of the garlic, you use the scape in the recipe. You can chop it up and put it into salads. It's a lot of things that you can do and have fun with. Liz says, I love garlic, and this season was my first time ever had a harvest of my own. You should be very proud. That's actually a fantastic feeling, that first time that you get it. Mike says, I got my Gardner garlic last week, or got it in last week. Now I've got to hold my taters for a while. Yeah. So that's garlic stores. And all the garlic that was harvested this year, and most of it was harvested in the summer, it'll wait until you can get in the ground. The key is you need to wait to get in the ground. I'll talk about that here just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and roll through to see if there's anyone else that's got some questions. Janet's asking, just bought some survival seed collections. They say will keep 3 to 8 years. Anyone have experience with growing from these? Yes, I do. I actually have a number of videos from the Survival Seed Company. And so I talk about some of the plantings and how to plan for survival gardens. And I've also got a number of videos on how long seeds last. And so, yes, you can expect that when you get a seed collection, depending on the plant, the seeds will last 3 to 8 years. And so I've got a lot of experience. Feel free to look up any of my videos along those lines, and maybe that'll help answer some of the specific questions you have about them. Wasabi Gal says, I have had good luck with the local farmers markets to get good garlic from my area. A good point. And so you can take the garlic from the supermarket and plant that in your garden. Some of the garlic that you're getting in the supermarket has been treated with chemicals so that they won't sprout while they're in storage, while they're being transported, and while they're in the supermarket. And so there could be an issue with some of that garlic sprouting and growing if it has been treated with those chemicals. And so I suggest getting organic garlic, even at the supermarket. And yes, you can plant that in your garden. I agree that maybe a better way is to go to a farmer's market. Chances are the farmer's market is going to have garlic from your area. Chances are it's going to be organic and not be sprayed with chemicals. And yes, you can get good garlic for your area and put it into your garden. If a farmer near you is growing that same garlic, then you should be able to grow it without any issue. TJ the Hawk says, I found jumbo music garlic cloves at my local farmer's market for $20 a pound. No shipping. Keen Garlic had me for more than $30 a pound of jumbo music cloves. Yeah, that's one reason why I like the music, is it really does give some big cloves. The expense can be high. You go to the supermarket, and I did a video a while back, and I included garlic at the supermarket. And I want to say at the time it was like $1.50 a bulb. If you buy online the planting garlic, it's going to probably end up being $4 or $5 per bulb, or it's sold by the pound. And so you might get 3 or 4, maybe 5 bulbs per pound, depending on what variety it is. And you're going to pay $20 to $30. Absolutely. That's why it ends up being like $5 per bulb. And that can be difficult. I mean, it's hard when you go to the supermarket and you see that clove, usually smaller than what you can grow in your garden for like $1.50, and then they want so much money online. I suggest getting it. You're not going to find music garlic at your supermarket, and a lot of us grow it because it's a great variety. You only need to buy it once. You get that first bulb, or maybe a couple bulbs, put them in your garlic, and then next year when you harvest, for every clove you plant, you're getting a bulb. And depending on the variety, you may get between 5 and 12 cloves. So I think the music is somewhere in the 6 to 8 category. So you grow music and you get 6 cloves. Well, that one bulb this year gives you 6 bulbs next year. And then the following year, you have 6 bulbs. Well, you save 2 for planting and then eat the rest. Well, now those 2 will give you 12. Well, those 12 bulbs with 6 cloves each, now all of a sudden you're up to 72. That's really a great way to start developing a garlic crop every year, is to start small. It's going to be expensive when you buy it, and then save it. And in just a couple years, you could potentially have 100 bulbs ready for harvest. And you eat them, you powder them. I've got a video on how I powder my garlic. You can freeze them, you can dehydrate them, but more importantly, you save some of them for planting again. And that's really a wonderful way to do it. I bet Jesus Plantas says, maybe I'll move house and I've already bought German hardy garlic. Nice. Has anyone had success growing garlic in pots? I'm in the Texas Panhandle. So I've had mixed success with garlic in pots, but that's because I'm in zone 5B. I'm guessing you're in zone 6, and 6 is generally the cutoff I find for growing garlic in containers. And grow in zone 7, and they should grow fine without any issue. In zone 6, it might be a little bit difficult to grow in containers. And then for me in zone 5, I haven't had complete success. It just never makes it. Not all the cloves make it through the year. And I think it's partly because the containers in areas with harsh winters will freeze solid, and you're not able to water, and the cloves desiccate, and then spring comes, and it's a freeze thaw within that container, and that's just too much stress on on the cloves. They do great in my raised beds, my 4 feet by 8 foot raised beds, because the soil temperature tends to moderate, still freezes, the ground still gets frozen, but you don't have that freeze thaw cycle over and over again that would happen in a container. And you don't have the freeze happen as quickly as it might happen in a container, and you don't have the thaw happen as quickly as it might happen in a container. So you can still grow in containers, but I would suggest in a pot or a container, if you're growing or attempting to grow garlic and you have harsh winters, just bring the pots into a shed or into a garage that's a little bit warmer. It doesn't have that severe exposure to the cold and the drying, and then occasionally water. One, if the soil gets dry and stays dry, and then it warms up, that's what's really bad for those young cloves. And so you may occasionally need to water in winter in a container or a pot to keep your cloves alive. Rick is saying that in Sydney, Australia, they can grow both. So good for you. The ability to grow both the hardneck and the softneck really is an advantage. Masabi Gal loved the Polish and Transylvanian softneck in Minnesota Zone 3. So Transylvania is a region of Europe that sees some severe winters. So if you can get a Russian softneck, or in this case, a Transylvanian softneck, go for it if you want to try something like that in the regions that are definitely cold. Pat says, how can I increase scape harvest? You introduced them to us a few years back. We love them. And so you're going to get one scape per plant. There's no way to generate more than one scape. So to increase your scape harvest, you're going to have to grow more bulbs. It's as simple as that. More cloves from the more bulbs. So if you're only growing 12 of the garlic that you want, that is produced, the hardneck that's producing that scape, next year grow 24 or 36 or whatever you have room for. That's really the only way you can increase your harvest. And then depending on how you use it, I like to harvest it earlier when they're still relatively young, when they're still really curly and soft, because particularly in a pesto, the soft hardneck will blend up better with the nuts and the olive oil and the cheese. When it gets bigger, it doesn't blend up as well. It tends to be a little chunkier, I guess you could say. So the longer you wait, the longer the scape is going to get. So you could increase your harvest by waiting until it reaches full size, but then you have to balance that against the woodiness depending on how you're going to use it. But grow more garlic and you'll have more scapes. And I think that's really the best answer. Mike is saying, I grow music and Nootka rose, music for best taste and Nootka rose for storage. There you go. Great approach. Grow multiple types. John says Russian black Krim tomatoes are great. Maybe they know garlic also. For those of you that are regular viewers, black Krim is among my favorite, and that comes from the Crimean region. And yes, there are also many garlics from that region as well. Now, Heidi says the larger the individual cloves of garlic, the larger the head that grows from them. Absolutely. And so when I'm growing my garlic, I am choosing the biggest bulbs. So I've already done this when I harvested a few months ago. As I was harvesting my garlic, I separated it out. And so I took the biggest bulbs and put them into a paper sack for planting later on. And then what I ate when I'm using in the kitchen is the smaller bulbs with smaller cloves. When it comes time to plant, depending on the variety, you want to have those biggest bulbs and then pull them apart. not all of them are going to be the same size. Now, music is pretty consistent, where most of the cloves in the music bulb are going to be about the same size. And so you can plant all of those cloves from a big bulb and expect that you're going to get a big bulb or a large head of garlic next year. But there's a lot of varieties, particularly the soft neck varieties, that when you open them up and pull apart all of those cloves, you're going to get some small ones and you're going to get some big ones. Just plant the big ones and take the small ones back to the kitchen. That's a big reason why you want to grow a lot of garlic if you're planning to replant, because some of those soft neck varieties that I've grown in the past, I would have to go through 3 or 4 or 5 bulbs to get enough of the big cloves to then put into the ground, anticipating a good harvest. And the more you do that every year, you can expect that your bulbs will be bigger and bigger, and it'll be easier to find the large cloves. But it's a good idea to start with the big if you can. You don't know what you're going to get necessarily when you buy sight unseen from an online source. Yet another reason to go to your nursery, where you can hand pick the bulbs you want based on size and based on variety. Dana says, I tried growing hardneck last year and my crop was pathetic, small, sad bulbs. It's just not cold enough here. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So there you go. Look into some of the soft neck varieties that don't need as much cold. And then next year we can talk about garlic, and hopefully you can tell us you had better success with it because you were growing a different variety. Jen says, I ordered a small batch of music and will cold stratify in the fridge for a month before planting. Also ordered a variety pack of soft neck for southern states. Nice. And so I've talked about this a little bit in a couple of my videos and on how to grow garlic. If you live in a warm region and you can't give the cold, and you don't want to get one of those varieties that is designed for a warm region, then you can trick the garlic. You can put those bulbs in your refrigerator to get cold, to cold stratify them. And if they're exposed to the cold in your refrigerator, typically for at least 6 weeks, I'd do it for a couple months. Now, when you put them into your garden, the garlic thinks it's been growing in a cold region, and you can expect the bulbs to develop to a larger size. Yes, that works. Yes, you should definitely take advantage of that if you want to grow a hardneck variety in particular and you live in a warmer region. So thank you for saying that, Jen, because that is a good idea. Betty's saying, I bought my original garlic from a local farmer at their market. It was meant for eating, but I planted it, replanting the same cloves every year since. No idea what kind, but it's likely music. Cool. Yeah, if you plant something and you like it, just keep doing it over and over again. And I've mentioned this before that a few years back, I was growing a lot of different garlic, a lot of different varieties. And we had a terrible storm with hail and wind, and it knocked down and blew away all of my plant tags. And so I was left with a bed of, I think, 8, maybe 10 different varieties of garlic in that bed. And at harvest time, I had no idea which was which. So I saved the biggest and the tastiest, and I grow them still, not knowing what the varieties are, but I like it and I grow it. The music I know is music because I wanted to be sure. So after that event, I did buy music again so that I could be sure I knew which of my bulbs were music. And now I kind of segregate when I plant the music. So if I lose my plant tags again, at least I know which end of my bed is the music, so I don't have that problem again. Yeah, I like, and I think most of you like as well, knowing what varieties you're growing, but that's not necessary. You can still grow garlic without knowing what it is. Dwayne says garlic is good in many ways. Roasted garlic is excellent because it has a nice flavor to it. That's one of the most amazing things about the the uh, the Russian striped garlic and those really intense, that Siberian is a really intense garlic when you eat it raw. And so raw garlic has a much more intense flavor. So if you're making like a vinaigrette or slicing garlic to put into a salad or making a pesto, that raw garlic is really going to add a flavor that you've never experienced before. But when you roast those same garlic bulbs, the flavor is completely different still. It becomes sweet. It becomes a more robust garlic flavor. And that heat and that intense sharpness of the clove is lost when it's roasted. And roasted garlic really is fantastic. So I agree. Wonderful way to eat it. Even Nicholas Art says, I tried growing garlic for the first time last fall. Had a great harvest this summer. Good to hear. Bought mine at the local village nursery. There you go. Great idea on what to do. Heidi says, here in Idaho, we have to only get garlic that's grown in Idaho to limit white rot. Another great point. If you happen to have a disease that affects alliums and garlic specifically to what is affected by the disease, then yes, getting disease-resistant varieties can be important. And a lot of the growers online, a lot of those seed companies that are selling the garlic, if it is a variety that has some disease resistance, they should mention that in the comments. And so if Idaho has the white rot and there are varieties that are resistant to that are sold at the local nursery, great thinking, Heidi. That is the way to definitely have more success rather than doing some of that experimenting and guessing, and then you lose your whole crop because you've had an issue with it. Ralph says, planted garlic bulbs the end of August, growing last year started too late. Hope it works. So let's talk about planting and growing the garlic. And so there's a couple factors that really affect how the garlic grows, and it is temperature and moisture. And so what most of us do and what is recommended is that you plant the garlic in fall because you want those cloves in the ground. You want them to have some warmth, but the soil is still cool. And so they start sending out roots, but the soil temperature is not enough for them to actually develop into a plant. And so as the soil is cool, the roots start to develop. And then the temperature drops going into winter, and those cloves get cold. That tells them it's time to go dormant. Winter's coming. They stop their growth. They have some root development, and they don't have any plant development. And then as we go into spring, the temperature starts warming up again. And when the cool soil of spring hits that clove, more roots start developing. And the clove starts thinking, oh, maybe it's time to wake up. As the soil temperature warms, the plant starts growing. And so you've already got that those roots in place to support the growing plant. That initial growth of the plant is all coming from the clove. It's that stored energy within the clove that produces the growth of the plant. Once the plant has the leaves above ground and is growing, now photosynthesis takes over, and that supplies the energy for the clove to now split into more cloves and become a bulb. That's the basic growth cycle of the plant. Then when it gets hot, moving into summer, the plant is done. The leaves start to turn brown, and that's when you harvest the garlic. So garlic has a very distinctive life cycle that is about 9 months long, depending on where you live and what varieties you're growing. If you plant too late in the year, what happens is you don't get that initial root development. So now you have a clove that's just sitting in the soil, and it was neither turned on nor turned off as far as the growth is concerned. And it's just sitting there. So it's really not a growing plant that went dormant. It's just a clove sitting in the soil. So it's very susceptible to rot if the soil gets overly wet. It's also very susceptible to desiccating because if it gets dry, all that moisture is going to be drawn out of the clove. And that's the biggest issue when planting too late, is that you don't have success. You might not get any crop at all because those cloves did not have the proper development. Generally, we're putting our cloves in the ground 4 to 6 weeks before the ground freezes. So we're doing it at a cool time of year. The clove is exposed to those cool and then cold temperatures, and then it goes dormant. You can also, Ralph, plant too early. If you plant in August, for many of us, that would probably be too early. What happens is the roots develop. Now the soil is warm and a plant grows. And so the garlic grows. And that's probably what you're seeing right now, is that you have garlic plants growing. The concern about that is that the leaves are what supply the energy to the cloves to be able to survive the winter. When those garlic plants are still young, the energy is coming from the cloves. So depending on what your timing is and when your winter sets in, that clove is dissipated all of its energy to go into the initial plant development. Now the plant grows, winter sets in. Depending on where you are, the harsh winter can kill the leaves. They're just going to freeze and drop off. It doesn't kill the plant. It's a very hardy plant, but the leaves are now no longer supplying the energy to the clove. And because the clove spent so much energy growing those new leaves, there might not be enough energy for the clove to survive the winter. And then when spring comes, if there was enough energy and if it did survive the winter, it's going to start the whole cycle over again, and it's going to start growing a new garlic plant. Well, if the energy levels within the clove have been dissipated, then that initial plant might not be that strong. It'll probably still grow and you'll probably still get a plant, but you probably won't get that big bulb development that you're looking for. So too soon can be as bad as too late. It all depends on how harsh your winters are. If you don't have harsh winters, then yes, you can plant garlic in the end of summer and it can grow through the winter. You might not get that bulb development, but the plant itself will probably be okay. So I hope it works for you, Ralph. You'll just have to wait and see how well they do go through the winter. But to get the typical life cycle, we want to be putting the cloves in the ground 4 to 6 weeks before the freezing, not the first frost. You'll often wait until the first frost hits and then put the garlic in the ground. And so for me here in Colorado, my ground generally is going to start freezing in the beginning of December. Sometimes it's the end of November. My first frost happens sometime in the beginning of October. So if I plant my cloves in the middle of October, which is a general guideline for me, then that allows about 6 weeks for those cloves to develop in the cool soil before the ground freezes. If you have an earlier onset of winter, you might want to be planting in late September or early October. If your winter doesn't set in until later in December or maybe early January, then you can get by with planting in November. So it all depends on your region. And that's another reason to go to your local nursery to get your cloves, because they can give you the recommendations on when to actually start the cloves in your garden to match with your climate. And that way you should have more success. And so Shirley's asking about elephant garlic. Will it grow in Colorado? So when I talk about the hardneck and the softneck, now we can talk about elephant garlic. Now, elephant garlic really isn't garlic. It's actually part of the leek family. So it's closer to a leek or an onion than it is to garlic, but it has a garlic flavor to it. And yes, it can be grown in Colorado. I've grown it periodically. I've never gotten the big, huge bulbs that elephant garlic should grow into. And so, at least in my part of Colorado, I can grow the elephant garlic, but it's just a bigger form of garlic. It's not the huge size that a lot of people are growing in different regions. It's a milder taste of garlic. And so if you like garlic, but you don't want to grow the intense garlic, sure, go ahead and try growing some of the elephant garlic. And that is definitely an option to do something different and have some fun with it. Dennis is saying the garlic festivals moved to Los Banos, California, starting this year. Cool. They had it the first weekend of September. That's good to know. I wasn't aware of that. So thank you for that, Dennis. I'm glad to know that it wasn't lost completely. John says that garlic scapes are a new favorite for my salads. There you go. So if you didn't know about garlic scapes, now today, hopefully you have learned a little bit more about garlic. Raven's Little Connecticut Garden. Do you plant your garlic by the moon cycle? I don't. Because my growing season is so short, and because my spring and fall almost happens overnight, if I were to grow on the moon cycle, I might miss the right time. So I tend to go more of the calendar, looking for like that 4 to 6 weeks before I think a freeze will hit or the ground will start freezing in December. Because if I were to go by the moon cycle, I might be 2 or 3 weeks early. I might be 2 or 3 weeks late. And instead, I'm going by how much time is left, regardless of what's happening with the moon. And that tends to make sure that I have a good harvest. Shandy's Garden says, I freeze all my garlic scapes and then grind them up and have them all sitting next to the stove. I put them on everything. There you go. Garlic scapes are just one of those things. There's the link to my video that Jay posted on how to make garlic scape pesto. Scapes are one of those things that nobody knows about unless you're a gardener. You know, I've gone to farmers markets occasionally, very occasionally, and they've got garlic scapes for sale, and nobody knows what it is except for gardeners. And like even Nichols Art says, I learned everything about growing garlic, including using scapes from Gardner Scott. Thank you. You're very welcome. Yeah, it's just one of those things that isn't taught. You don't see it in gardening books. You don't see it at gardening classes. Scapes are just one of those things that not just gardeners, but gardeners who grow garlic are really the only ones that know much about the scapes. So I think that's a nice hidden secret. Serena says, I have garlic from Johnny's Hardneck, and I've had it in my fridge for about 2 months. I'm in Oklahoma zone 7, first frost November 1st. When should I plant garlic? So again, I would get with your local nursery, and I don't know when your ground freezes there. And so that's going to be the determination. It doesn't have anything to do with the first frost, but it sounds like if your frost is in November, then you would probably be planting maybe the second week of November. So ask some of the local nursery folks and or your local master gardeners, and they can give you a better idea based on your temperatures in your region. I don't want to tell you to put it in the ground in October like I do, because I'm in zone 5 and my winters are going to be harsher and they come sooner. And that's really the biggest issue. Dwayne's asking, can you grow garlic inside? I'm in Alberta, Canada, and we have a similar climate to Colorado. Can you make it so you have garlic year round if you don't have year round warm weather? Sure. But like I mentioned earlier, you're not going to get the bulbs unless they're exposed to the cold temperatures beforehand. So, like most plants, you can grow them inside. You just have to make modifications to how you grow. So, maybe have some growing, and then you plan the cycle for when you plant the next batch and have those sitting in the refrigerator being exposed to the cold, because your household, I'm guessing, is not going to get cold enough. Your room temperature is where you're growing them, and then plant some more and grow them under lights. Yeah, it should work well. I I don't know. There are greenhouses that are growing garlic year round. They just have to modify the temperatures and that exposure to cold. As long as you give it the full light and the water, you'll be able to grow them without too much difficulty. So I know I'm behind with the comments, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Mobius is asking about how do we save them? Best practices, please. And so if you've grown potatoes or if you've grown winter squash uh, and you're now growing garlic, the way you save all of these harvests are essentially the same. They will store longer if they're in a cool, dry, dark area. And that's what you want to do. If you save your garlic in your pantry, it'll last a few months. And this is what I typically do. I'll have a lot of garlic. I expect that I'm going to be using a lot of garlic. And so I'll put the garlic in a paper bag in my pantry. I don't want to necessarily put them in a plastic bag because then you might get some mold development, because the bulbs are moist. So you do want them to breathe. So put them in my pantry, and then inevitably I don't use as many as I would like. And then come January or February, I go into the pantry to pull out some garlic and they're all dried up. That's because they were in one of the warmest areas of my house and they didn't have the ideal storage conditions. Ideally, the best practices are cool, dark, and dry. And then depending on the variety, they should last months. The soft necks will last months longer than the hard necks, but even the hard necks can be expected to last a number of months if you store them that way. Dwayne says putting cut garlic cloves in red wine vinegar and letting it sit for a while gives you a flavorful vinegar. Absolutely. That's I like to make vinaigrettes by doing that with a flavored vinegar. Barbara says I ordered hardneck garlic because I can only find soft necks in my local grocery stores. Is it possible to successfully grow soft necks in Pennsylvania zone 5B, 6A? Yes, I'm in 5B and I have successfully grown soft necks. Absolutely. It's the ones that you might not have success with are the soft neck varieties that are made for growing in Texas and Louisiana. But as long as it's just a general soft neck variety that is prevalent in the nurseries online and the nurseries, even my nursery, local nurseries sell soft neck varieties. It's not all hard neck varieties. So yes, it is definitely possible. Seek out what is selling in your area for soft necks, and that would be a good place to start. And then the other option is when you go to an online site, go ahead and find that they are or look to see what it says about it online, because especially the bigger producers will often give guidelines as to how successful the soft neck varieties might be in a cold region. Shandy's Garden, you're exactly right. I would recommend that nobody store the garlic in oil, not unless you're going to use it pretty much right away. Yes, that is a very good caveat. When I talk about using the flavored oil, it is putting the garlic into the oil, letting it sit for a couple days in the refrigerator, and then using that oil. Oil is not a good preservation method for garlic. You can definitely run into some issues if it stays in too long. You can have mold grow, absolutely, if you're trying to to save your garlic in oil. So don't use it as a way to store it. Just use it as a way to flavor the oil for a brief period before you plan to use that oil. So thank you for pointing that out, because that is a safety consideration when we talk about food safety and preservation. Jen says, any opinion on soaking cloves before planting? I've seen reference to inoculating soaks, but haven't tried it. My garlic this year was devastated by allium aphids. So I don't soak anything before planting. I have done some when I did my video on the beans that I got from the supermarket. I planted those bean seeds. I did soak those overnight just because they had been sitting in those plastic bags in the supermarket for so long that I was concerned they might have been desiccated to the point that they would fall apart. So I soaked those and then only planted the beans that were still whole, because a lot of those beans did fall apart when I soaked them. But for anything else, no, I don't soak anything else. I don't have a lot of those issues. There are, if you have some diseases, yes, soaking things in like hydrogen peroxide ahead of time might be beneficial if you've had some problems with diseases in seeds that you've saved. There are other tips. I can't speak to them because I haven't tried them, about soaking in different things. For instance, hot pepper seeds. I've seen that you make a soak with tea and then soak the pepper seeds in tea and then plant them. I grew hot pepper seeds just fine without soaking in tea. So the seed has everything it needs to grow. And as long as you provide it with a warm medium and then water, and as long as it's loose enough that there's some oxygen in there, that's all the seed needs. It just needs water, warmth, and oxygen to start growing. Then when the seedling emerges, it's going to need light. That's it. That's all you have to give to your seeds, unless you have a very specific disease like allium aphids. I'm not sure what you could soak the cloves in that would prevent the allium aphids. I think there might be other things you could do. That's probably more of a soil issue that I would address, what you could do with the soil rather than soaking the cloves. So I don't have experience with that because I haven't needed to. And for most of the things that I've seen people soaking, I've grown the same thing without soaking and had fine results. So I think it's just very specific issues, and more of it is disease related as to whether you should soak something or not. And I would look for the controls for the allium aphids specifically to see what you can do. Aphids are very susceptible to some of the things like neem oil, for instance, and insecticidal soap, and even just sprays of water. So depending on how bad the infestation is, there might be other methods that you could take to help lessen those problems. Wickersure Project Offline has a question. Did we talk about how deep to plant garlic? This is one of those semi-deep planting bowls. So good point. So generally, when we plant our bulbs, and this holds true for most of our fall planted bulbs, most of what we're growing as a fall planted bulb is going to be a spring flower, but the basic process is the same. You put your clove 2 to 3 times as deep as the size of the clove. So if your clove is 1 inch tall and you've got the flat end, that's the bottom, that's where the roots come out, and you've got your pointed end, that's where the plant is going to grow, and your clove is 1 inch tall, then you're going to dig a hole 2 to 3 inches deep to put that clove into. The temperature of your winter does play a factor. And so if you have an early onset winter, and if winter happens really quickly, you might want to plant a little bit deeper so that the soil temperature is moderated for a longer period of time. And then the opposite is true. If you're planting when it's really hot out still, if the soil is hot, then you might want to plant a little bit deeper to help moderate the temperature. So like we're going through a hot spell right now. I think we're going to set a high temperature record again tomorrow. Those are the kind of things that you look for if it's time to plant, but the temperatures right now are just too extreme one way or the other. You might want to plant a little bit deeper. So generally 2 to 3 inches deep is what we're going to be planting when we put our cloves. The bigger cloves are going to go a little bit deeper. The smaller cloves are going to be a little shallower. So one of the varieties that I bought last year, I think it was, is shashili. And it's a nice garlic, but it's small bulbs and small cloves. I think I got like 8 bulbs per pound. I mean, it's pretty small. Those would be planted closer to that 2-inch depth because it's a smaller clove. So general guideline, but again, it comes down to what works best for you. I love experimentation. And so if you're new to garlic planting and you're not sure which would be best for you, then try both. Take part of your garlic bed and use the same cloves, put some of them 2 inches deep and some of them 3 inches deep. Keep a record of it, grow it, see how well they do. And then next year, you'll have a better answer for what works best for you and your climate. I just, and you'll see this in my videos, I make it as easy as possible. So I'll put the cloves on top of the surface, and then I just push the cloves in with my fingers, or I'll use a trowel to dig a shallow hole and then press the cloves in. And it ends up being close to about the 3-inch point. For me, that's what works best. Okay, Liz says, do you have to cut off the scapes? You should. You don't have to. But like with any plant and any seed, it's going to take energy to produce new growth. So as the scape grows, the plant is sending energy to the scape. If you don't cut off the scape, all of that energy is now in the scape. Nothing wrong with that. But it's at the expense of the bulb. So if you cut off the scape, the plant is still going to be producing the same amount of energy. It's just now some of that energy is going to go into the bulb, and the bulb can grow bigger. So if you cut the scape, chances are you're going to have a bigger bulb. If you don't cut the scape, you may not even notice. The bulb will probably still be good size. It just might not be as big as it could be if you didn't cut the scape. And if you don't cut the scape, then you don't get to eat it. You know, if you wait until harvest time to use the scape, it's going to have lost its flavor. It's not going to be tender at all. And so it's one of those things that I would suggest you, if you want to eat the scape, harvest sooner. And the result of that is that you're probably going to have a bigger bulb as a result of it. So while I'm thinking about it, let's go ahead and talk about the background today. This is Dan Galamides' garden. We've seen it before in previous years, and he's added some stuff to the garden this year, but I just wanted to show it. I appreciate you, Dan, for sharing this. And, you know, as with all gardening, and when I talk about experimenting and trying new things and how we grow and where we grow, I love it when a gardener does a lot of different stuff. So if you look at the picture behind me, you can see that there's a green stalk that's just loaded with plants. That's fantastic. You can see in the foreground here, there are containers. And then as you go back, you can see all kinds of different raised beds. There's a nice sitting bench. And then there's different trellises, including this tall trellis. You can see some of the twine that's dropping down into the bed. And so lots of different methods of gardening, all within a single garden space. You don't have to garden everything the same way. You can grow only in containers. You can grow only in a green stock. You can grow only in raised beds, but try it all. That's a really good way to find out what you prefer. That's a huge reason why I am such an advocate of raised bed gardening, is because I've grown in the ground and I've grown in containers and I've grown in green stocks and I've grown hydroponically and I've grown aquaponically. And for me, the raised bed growing is the most successful. I can grow more things in more ways in my raised beds than any other option. So that's why I like raised beds. Raised beds aren't best for everybody. I think they have advantages that all gardeners can benefit from depending on how you use them, but it may not be best. You need to find what's best for you. I know gardeners that love their green stalks and they have green stock towers as their favorite method of gardening, and they have a ton of green stock towers. Nothing wrong with that. I love my green stocks. I've got 4 of them because they give me so much variety. And of course, I've got the link to the green stock below because I think it's such a great growing system. I also have grow bags and I got pots and I've got 5-gallon buckets because those also give me options and can expand what I grow in my garden. So when I see what Dan is doing here, I love it. I think there's just so much that we can look at and observe. And then from a design perspective, I like order and I like symmetry. So you can see he's got the beds that are surrounded by the gravel and the pavers for little pathways. I think that's wonderful too. So much to see in this picture. Spend some time looking at the picture behind me just to see what he's doing, how he's got some of these trellises within the pots. Again, if you have a sturdy enough trellis and you're just growing something like peppers that aren't going to get real tall, you can do that. For beds that might be growing tomatoes that need more support, then you need a sturdier trellis. And so another great example of some of what Dan's doing, where the trellises are different as well. Not only what he's growing in, but how he's growing by having the trellis match the plants that are matched with the beds. So again, thank you, Dan. I appreciate you for sharing this. And of course, to everyone, if you want me to see your garden and if you're willing to share it with the rest of us, you can send it to me, gardenerscott@gardenerscott.com. I do need your permission. I need you to specifically say that you are giving me your permission to use it on the live stream, and then I'll use it. If you send me a picture, I'll comment on it and thank you for it. But unless you specifically tell me that you want it to be used, I won't use it. And it's just between you and me. So if you've ever sent me a picture and I didn't use it, that may be the reason why. It also helps to be in landscape and send me the full file. If the file is too small, my software that I use for this background, it doesn't look good if the file size is too small. So full size landscape, if you send it to me in profile view and then I attempt to show it in landscape, it doesn't always come across as well. So those are usually issues if you've sent something to me and it didn't work out, is because one of those things probably happened. John says that picture shows a Hollywood painted beautiful sky and garden. There you go. And I think that is a great way to say it. Milltown Life is asking, why does softneck garlic not produce escape, or would it if left long enough? It's just the way that they grow. Just like any plant that we grow has very specific characteristics. There are some potatoes, fingerling potato varieties that you grow that will never get big. They will only stay small, and you can leave them in the ground for a long time and they're not going to grow into big potatoes. They're always going to be small potatoes. Just like cherry tomatoes are always going to be small tomatoes. They'll never grow into beefsteak tomatoes. Garlics are in different categories like that. You got the soft necks that don't develop escape, and you got the hard necks that develop escape. So no, if you left a a soft neck in the ground, it's not going to develop that scape that a hard neck variety would develop. Now, depending on the soft neck, there are some soft neck varieties that will send up a flower stalk because that's how they can get the seeds and do some of that development. But it's not the same as the hard neck scape. And I've been growing soft necks for a long time, and I've never had any of those that actually sent up a flower stalk. But it's possible depending on the variety you have. Gardening channel with Jacob's asking, can I plant garlic by carrots? Yeah, uh, I garlic is one of those things, and you'll see a lot of suggestions for companion planting, where you put garlic in every bed as a deterrence for an insect pest or an animal pest. I haven't seen any good research that says any of that actually works, but I haven't seen anything that says that it's harmful in any way. The only issue might be that if you live in an area that has some of those allium pests, either an allium disease or an allium uh, insect that targets the alliums, then I would avoid planting garlic next to something like that. So if I was growing an allium flower, for instance, you might avoid planting those allium bulbs next to the garlic bulbs. You might want to avoid planting garlic next to onions if you have those diseases or if you have those type of pests. But for garlic to be planted anywhere else in the garden, it's just another plant. And if you're planting it by carrots, it should be fine. The only issue with growing it in carrots is if the timing is such that the bulb is growing big and the garlic is, or the carrot is too close. Now that garlic bulb is going to interfere with the growth of that garlic root, and you might not get a straight carrot root. But I'm not aware of anything that would cause either the carrot to interfere with the garlic or the garlic to interfere with the carrots as far as a companion planting perspective. Uh, they're completely different species, and they've got different pests, and so I don't think there's really much to be concerned about. Shandy's Garden says, would you please talk about spring planting of garlic? Sure. I actually have a good buddy, Jason, who does this. He calls it green garlic. He will grow and sell it at the farmer's market. He grows a lot of stuff and sells at the farmer's market. And the garlic he sells at the farmer's market, he sells as green garlic. And so what he does is he saves the cloves, stores them through the winter. And generally, of course, it's a soft neck variety that he's growing. And then he plants it in early spring here in Colorado. As soon as the soil can be worked, he's putting those cloves in the ground. And once the soil starts warming up and he's been watering, the garlic starts growing and it grows into a garlic plant. The difference is that he's not cold stratifying. He's not putting it in the refrigerator. He's growing it as a single season crop, basically. He puts it in the ground in spring and he's going to harvest in summer. And it looks a lot like green onions, except that the clove is a little bit bigger than the base of a green onion. And you can use it just the way you use a green onion, and that's how he uses it. So he's a chef, and so for a lot of his dishes, instead of using chives or green onion, he uses the spring planted garlic, chops up the leaves. It's got anything that's under the ground has got a little white stalk to it, kind of like a green onion, and then it's got that little bulb that was the clove that did not split into a bulb. And easy to do. If you're going into springtime and you still have some garlic that survived your storage, consider doing that. It probably won't last long enough for the next fall. So to harvest in summer, when most of us harvest our garlic, it can save a long time, but it might not be able to save for 15 months until you get to the next year's planting. But it should be able to save for 8 months before you plant in early spring. And that's a definite option. So take a look at those garlic cloves if you have any left over that you didn't eat and they were in storage over the winter, and put them in the ground. But recognize without that cold stratification, they're not going to develop the bulb. And so grow them like you would a green onion and use them like you would a green onion. And it might add something to the variety of the crops that you're growing in your garden. And so he loves growing his green garlic because it never develops into a bulb, and that's okay. That's exactly why he's doing it. Okay, let's see. Lily says, what are the most spicy and flavorful types of garlic? So the ones that I've had tend to be those Eastern European Russian varieties. The Russian purple stripes, and most of them have a name that tells where they're from, be it Eastern Europe or some part of Russia, like the Siberian. I think you could check out that video for sure, but I think the Siberian was the one that was the spiciest when we were tasting all of those garlics. That video is a few years old, and so I don't remember exactly how we rated them and which one came out as the spiciest. But you can see that if you want to watch that video of mine. And I think I saw that Jay had posted a link to it. And spicy is relative. At the time when we were tasting them, some of those spicy varieties were too spicy for some members of my family. And others were like, oh, wow, this is just perfect. So it's all relative. If you're looking for the really spicy stuff, yeah, I would focus on that region of Europe and kind of an idea of what to look for. Jen, that's a good idea. Rule of thumb where I am is to plant on Halloween, easy trimmer. Yeah. And that's why you find out what is best for you. In my region, it tends to be the week after Halloween. That's the time of year that I'm looking at. I need to start thinking about getting the cloves in the ground. And so the week after Halloween is when I think about it, and then look at the long range forecast to see if there's any extremes coming. And then usually about that second week of October, or actually, we're talking about November, Halloween. The week before Halloween is what I'm talking about as far as I need to have my plants in the ground. No, Halloween's in October. I'm saying it right. Yes, the week after Halloween. I don't want to get confused with Thanksgiving because Thanksgiving is definitely a time of year that people are planting. So I know some people that say the week after Thanksgiving is when they put the plants in the ground. For me, it's the week after Halloween. For you, it's Halloween. Sorry if there was any confusion there. I confused myself as I was mixing up my holidays. Okay, let's see. Yeah, Dusty's got some really hot temperatures headed your way. Definitely something to be thinking about. I see that I've got a lot I need to catch up on. I'm just going to jump forward. If I've missed your question, I apologize. Lisa says, could you talk about amending the soil for garlic? So good point. So I was asked earlier today, I'm not sure if it was on Facebook or if it was on one of my videos, but someone was asking about, I think it was strawberries. It was my strawberry video. And a couple of days ago, someone was asking about garlic because they've been watching my garlic video. What fertilizer do I use? That typically is the question. And my answer is I don't use fertilizer. Those of you that have been following me for a while know I don't fertilize my garden. I amend my soil. And so when it comes to the garlic, I typically, and I'm doing it right now. I'm actually this year I'm planning to probably put my garlic in the same bed that it was in, but we'll see. Depending on the weather, it may and maybe in a different decision. But what typically happens is I will grow something, and come summertime, I harvest it all. And so I like to do this so that usually by August, I have a bare bed. Whatever was growing was harvested. So, like for instance, the garlic was harvested, that bed is bare. Now I go in and I am in the soil, primarily with compost, and I'm adding more organic matter to the soil. I'm trying to replenish what that garlic used up over the last year. Now that bed is ready. It's not necessarily ready for planting because that compost, even though it's mostly decomposed, still has a lot of rawness to it. And it's going to stimulate the production of the new bacteria and new fungi, and they're going to extract some of the nutrients from that compost. And then all those dead bodies of the bacteria and the fungi are going to sit in the soil and become more food for other organisms. And they're also going to release nutrients into the soil for the plants. That takes some time. So I like to give myself at least 2 months. So if I'm planning on putting my cloves in the ground that first or second week of October, I'd want to have my bed ready for planting in August so that it has a couple months to just get ready to release all those nutrients. Because I'm not going to be able to amend again while that garlic is growing for 9 months. Now, depending on my cycle within my garden and everything I'm growing, and whether I'm doing succession planting and whether I'm doing a fall crop, I will modify that slightly. And so the other bed I'm looking at right now, I've got some spinach and some radishes and some beets and some carrots. And they're probably still at least a month away. Most of them, I'm harvesting some already, but it's about another month before that bed is going to be empty. And so if I end up harvesting everything in that bed in October, I could use that bed for garlic. I would do the same thing. I would empty out the bed, I would add all the compost, and I would have that bed ready for planting. It's not as critical with the garlic when it comes to having that time frame so that the soil organisms can stabilize. Because remember, if you hit the timing right, all that's happening with those cloves is they're sending out new roots. They're not growing into a full-size plant. And it's the plant that really needs all those nutrients from the soil. So if I'm late preparing the bed, or if I choose a different bed to put my garlic into, I can still do all that amending with compost and then put the cloves in the ground and not worry too much about the bacteria and the fungi, because it's going to get cold, those cloves are going to go dormant. And then come springtime, when the soil starts warming up again, now all that soil life will jump into action and they'll work on releasing the nutrients that the compost brought to that soil. So I look at it a couple different ways, and a lot of it, honestly, is just whether I was ahead of the game. This year I'm ahead of the game. I've got a bare bed all ready to go. Or whether I was kind of behind the game, where I waited until that first frost killed everything. And that is also a determining factor. If that first frost hits in September, which occasionally happens, knock on wood, it isn't happening and it hasn't happened yet, but it has happened for me in the past. If all my cucumbers were killed off in that third week of September, there have been years that I pulled all those cucumber plants out, amended with compost, and then 3 weeks later, I was putting the garlic cloves in that bed, and they turned out just fine. The key is amend the soil. You've got to put the organic matter into the soil so that in springtime, the plants can use it. I occasionally, if I was late or if the winter set in and I felt that I wasn't complete with my amending, occasionally, I don't do it very often. In spring, I'll add a top dressing of compost. So I mulch, when I'm talking about that, I mulch my garlic very well through the winter. So I'll put the cloves in, I'll put some straw mulch on. As winter approaches, I'll put more straw mulch. So going into winter, my garlic tends to have about 4 inches of straw on top of it. And that's enough to carry it through the winter with absolutely no problems. Come springtime, if I feel like I didn't give enough boost to the soil in fall, then I will scrape off that straw, add a couple inches of compost, and then put the straw back on, so that there's a top dressing of compost. When I water, some of the nutrients from the compost will leach into the soil. Some of the organisms will come to the top of the surface where that compost now is, and they'll carry it down into the soil like earthworms and arthropods. So that's an option. I don't do that very often. I don't need to do that very often because most of the time I've done all the amending in fall. So hope that answers all your questions. Those were the key issues I think that are most important when we talk about the amending. Yankee Sister, thank you so much for that. Gardner Scott, your gardening knowledge is always on point. Thank you. Another great live. Thank you. And thank you. I do appreciate you being here, and I thank you so much with your strong support of the channel. And let me go ahead and say something to that as well, as far as the support of the channel. I know there are a number of you that have channels of your own. And I'll say that I don't watch all of your videos, but I do sneak in and watch many of your videos on a pretty regular basis. I suggest all of you support the channels that you can support. If you do nothing else but just watch a video and give it a thumbs up, that's huge as far as YouTube is concerned. That's a great way to support the channel. And so a lot of the channels here, Riverdale Gardens just said excellent live. I love that. Riverdale Gardens, is a channel. Wickeshire Project, Off Grid. So many of these channels you might be looking at and say, do they have videos? Are they something that I should check into? Check into it. Go ahead and click on them and see if maybe they do have a channel, especially the ones we've been seeing for years, Masabi Gal. Check on their channel. There might not be videos, but you might discover something new. Now, I know a lot of the viewers who do have channels, you'll often see in the chat, they'll talk about a video that they've released. Periodically, I'll highlight a video that somebody has done that I particularly like. That's how I discovered In the Garden with Eli and Kate, was just watching their videos and then seeing something I liked and then commenting on it. I'm cautious to comment because I've seen that's also happened on some channels where I make a comment and then everybody starts commenting on my comment. I don't want to disrupt channels, so I rarely comment. But if it's something that I really like, then yeah, I'll comment and I'll let you know. And I try to do that as often as I can. I don't want to take away from your channel, but I encourage all of you to seek out some of these other channels that you might not have discovered yet. And if nothing else, if it's somebody you're chatting with, they might not have videos, but at least you know what their homepage looks like, if they have a homepage. Just something to think about. And then there's other ways. Of course, I've got all my affiliate links in the discussion or in the description below. A lot of channels that are really trying to do a good job and really trying to grow will start setting up some of those affiliate links. And so use them. If there's something that you see in a video and they've got a link to it and you want to try it, click on the link of that person's video. It's a great way to support their channel. There's a lot of channels out there that I've discovered over the years that start, and then disappear, because it's hard. It's hard maintaining this, the schedule and the production and all the videos and all the things that it takes to be successful on YouTube. And some of that is financial. And so a lot of the, particularly the smaller channels, when you first get started, if you're not seeing that support, it's easy to just drop the whole idea. So give those small channels a chance by supporting them. You don't necessarily have to go out of your way, but it is a great way to show that you appreciate what they're doing. And then I've got a link in my description below as well. I do it in all my videos. If you shop on Amazon, you can click on a link of your favorite channel. If you like the Gardener Scott channel, then if you're going to buy something on Amazon, click on one of my videos, click on the Amazon link. It'll send you straight to Amazon. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't send you to a page you don't want to go to. I don't have a Gardener Scott store. I just have the Amazon link. And everything that you will buy on Amazon, I'll get a small percentage of that. Nothing extra to you, nothing extra that Amazon charges. Is just a way to support the channel. And it's not just me, it's everybody. So I encourage you to think about that. Even if it's just a simple thumbs up, support the channels that you like, because that thumbs up may make the difference in somebody's day. If you want to make a comment, make a comment. Those are huge. I start every morning by reading the comments on my videos from the day before. It's a great way to start the day. And then when you do something like this to support these live streams that we're doing, Lisa Potter, thank you so much for that contribution. You can do the super chat and help support the channel and everything I do, because I don't get paid to make these videos and I don't get paid to make these live streams. But when I see support like this, it really helps out, and it really does help keep my channel growing just like anybody else. And Lisa says, thank you so much for sharing your knowledgeable-age. So thank you for that, Lisa. I appreciate your support, and I thank you so much for being here. And there's Lisa with thank you so much for sharing all your wonderful knowledge again. So thank you. It's very deeply appreciated by me every time somebody says thank you. And like Gina says, love this community. Absolutely. This is one of those things that I just love the community as well. And knowing you're here and knowing that you're giving me your support, even if it's just a thumbs up, if it's a nice comment, it makes the world better for all of us, I think. And I just ask that you share some of that with all those other small creators out there who are trying to grow and making the videos, trying to make gardening better for you. Show a little love. It doesn't have to be financial. Not all of us can afford to do that. But a thumbs up and maybe a nice comment may be all that they need to keep going. And that can be very important. So thank you, all of you. Just by being here makes a difference to me. And of course, everything you say and everything you contribute just makes it so much of a wonderful world for me. That's why I'm here every Monday. And I'll be back next Monday to do it all over again. I hope you have a fantastic gardening week. I hope the weather is holding for you wherever you're at, and that you're able to get started in Australia or maybe start finishing up in Minnesota. Whatever it is, get out in your garden and enjoy it and have fun being a gardener. I'll see you next week.